Hi, everyone. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Be the Vessel podcast. My name is Daniel, and this is a space for healing, for guidance, for resonance at the particular frequency that you are ready to align with, to expand into. A place where the wounds that are surfacing, that are rising with the tides of your journey, are ready to be released and can be done so uh, through these words, through this frequency, a place where things may be elicited or relaxed or restored. Whatever it is that your mind and body are requiring to provide you greater access to the spiritual truth of who you are. And so, on that topic of things that may get in the way, things that may need to be healed, wounds that may remain blockages to where we are ready to go, I'm going to talk about judgment. A powerful topic, and one that has plagued me personally, and I am sure has plagued many of you, and rears its head very subtly, even as you continue to heal. Because what tends to happen, or at least what has happened for me, is that as your life starts to heal, as your life starts to change, you may start to recognize that other people's lives aren't changing in that same way. And that can be challenging. Now, it's also challenging when your life isn't changing and your life is stuck and your life is despairing and hopeless. And I have been there too, and you can still be mired in judgment, which you often are. It can be a form of protection. A protection against esteem, a protection against vulnerability, a protection against the things you dislike in yourself. And so it's very easy to project outward, to criticize others when you're really unhappy and dissatisfied with the way your own life is going, and the seeming unfairness of it all. Judgment can be a way to keep you comfortable, keep you from exposing yourself to perceived risk, but really new adventure, from trying new opportunities, right? You may have the friend or the family member, it may be you, who someone provides a new idea, a new spark, new opportunity. Go to a new restaurant, try something new on the weekend. And the answer you get is always one of judgment, one of, that's not going to be worth it. That's probably going to be terrible for this reason and this reason and this reason. Just a closing down. Judgment is really a closing down of opportunity. And that can really function as a way to keep us safe. But it's perceived safety. It's really stuckness. Because when we're not doing well, we're so fearful of the exposure. We're fearful of the healing process itself, of what will emerge, all the things that we're protecting against. Having to change our life in any way can feel deeply threatening. And yet there's a different kind of judgment, yet ultimately, I expect, is the same. When your life actually starts to change and your life actually starts to get better. One thing that may happen is you may start to look at other people and be like, why aren't you doing what I'm doing? Man, it's all you got to do, have a little discipline, and you may start telling your story, and, well, this is what happened to me, which may sound familiar because it's what I do a lot of the time. You tell your story, you share your journey in in hopes that it will inspire others, that it will motivate others, right? That's what a lot of motivational speakers do. Like a lot of the people we look up to and whose books we read. But it's a thin line. You see, it's a thin line because if we begin to see and hone in on the flaws in everyone else, though we may have begun to do some nice things for ourselves, the ego is still slipping in there, still finding its way into our spiritual path and really co-opting it into a path that is very familiar with, which is one of competition and of comparison and of not good enough. You see, if we begin to see everyone else who was not doing what we're doing as lesser, then we are really no different than the version of ourselves that was stuck in despair and hopelessness, protecting ourselves by judging everything else and everyone else. In this case, we are still maintaining the perfectionism, the sense that if we don't keep this up, if we don't keep up this new and improved version of ourselves and keep hustling to healing, then we too will be lesser like these other folks. We too will fall to the bottom. And the truth is with that perspective, you never arrive. There is nowhere to arrive to. Enlightenment doesn't work like that. It's not an achievement. It's an experience, and it's a process of surrender. And yes, there are action steps, of course. We do want things to change. I won't mince words about that. And language can get tricky when we talk about surrender versus will. With that said, if you notice yourself on this journey, however the journey is looking for you, whether you simply change the way that you eat or the way that you get up in the morning or the way that you go to bed at night or the substances that you put in your body or the certain modalities that you use to heal trauma or fix relationships or motivate yourself, wherever you are on your path, whatever you feel like you're working toward, if you are working towards something, it's very easy to get stuck in that place of, well, now that I'm doing it, look at all those people who aren't doing it. And the ego slips in there and says, don't you feel so good about that? Don't you feel so good in the airport when you're in a fasted state and someone else is eating Cinnabon? Oh, poor them. They're not going to feel as good as me. And it's a tricky game. Like on one level, it's super nice to feel good about what you're doing for yourself. And that is definitely rewarding and can be positively reinforcing. However, consider that the projection you are enacting of this person eating the Cinnabon who is lesser than you and in your mind in despair and going to feel terrible for their actions is really just a projection of you, how you would feel eating the Cinnabon, because you would punish yourself. All the names that come to mind, all the mocking tones and sympathy that your ego produces is the way that you would regard yourself if you slipped, if you ate something and came out of your fasted state. Oh no, now you fall from grace. So consider the person that you're judging the worst is the situation you are creating for yourself if you happen to fall off the wagon. Rather, if we practice cultivating forgiveness and compassion for wherever others are on their path, then we may do so for ourselves, and vice versa. If we allow ourselves to flow messily on the journey, because it is messy, it's not a linear shot. Time is not linear, neither is the healing path. If we allow it as best we can to be messy, it's not that frustration won't emerge. That's kind of part of the process. Judgment will emerge, anger will emerge. I was noticing some in myself earlier today. Can I be forgiving of that so that I may then be forgiving of others who are mired in judgment? And no one likes being judged by another. And it's very easy to say, man, they are so judgmental. You know, they are so judgmental of me. And other people they may be mired in their own judgment. Many of us are. And then notice how subtly it can shift when we recognize others' judgment, what it does to us, because it will find all the cracks in our seal. It will find the spaces that have not healed. It may elicit anger. It may elicit defensiveness and protection. And then we catapult headfirst into our own experience of anger and judgment at other people's judgment. Why the fuck do they care what I'm doing with my life? Why won't they just let me be? It's a dance. It's such a dance. And I think that as we move through the dance with as much grace and ease as we can, being a little roughed up like that, being a little poked at, poked in our cracks by other people's judgment, it does us good if we're ready for it, because it allows the insecurities to heal. It brings more confidence and conviction ultimately, and comfort, so that we get to a place where it really actually doesn't bother us what other people think. It really simply does, because it doesn't resonate at our frequency. It's not in the picture. It's not in the frame anymore. You may not even have to look at it, have to see it. And look, if you're living with people who are expressing such heavy judgment toward you, then that's likely a medicine for you. That's likely showing up for a reason. And who knows what the ultimate decision is meant to be, whether you're meant to stay in that partnership or that dynamic or leave. But consider that the judgment that shows up in our lives is there for a reason. It is there to bring those cracks to the light, to expose them. Again, to refer back to the more despairing version of ourselves, it's if we sink into judgment and if we push everyone away and say, no, I'm on my spiritual path. I don't have space for all these judgmental people. I need to align with people at my frequency, which is actually like what I've been saying, if you've been listening to me. So again, it's a dance. Like, it's not to say we're not supposed to find our community and find the things that vibrate on our frequency. But if we push too hard, push people too far away, notice it becomes another protection, another defense. Well, I can't handle other people's judgment because it brings up my own insecurities, the things that I'm still judgmental of myself for. So a little bit of that exposure is good. And a good practice is that when it shows up, when you find yourself in a circumstance with someone who does appear to be judging you, recognize this is happening for my own medicine. There must be unhealed parts of me that are still deeply judgmental. Otherwise, there would be no need for the universe to bring you this kind of experience. It simply wouldn't come into view. So if it's coming into view, do your best to see and take the medicine of looking at your own judgments that remain, because they're subtle and slippery. And even as you begin to heal in certain areas, the ego holds on tight, and it's clever, and it sneaks in and still manages to make this path a game of comparison, a game of competitiveness, when it's not. There is no scarcity here. There is abundance within, an abundance of love, an abundance of gratitude, an abundance of compassion and forgiveness. And so we keep coming back. And when judgment shows up, we continue to notice it and say, I'm in judgment again. I believe Brene Brown would speak to that. I'm in judgment again. No one likes being in judgment. As awful as it feels to be the person being judged or feeling judged by others, consider that those who are in judgment are also suffering immensely. It is not pleasurable to be judging, to be mocking. Because just like for us, for others, it is a protective mechanism that is very short-lived. Because once those objects of our judgment fall away or move out of view, or once that person that you're sort of judging eating the Cinnabon at the airport, once they leave and it's an empty seat, that vision turns back toward you. And for a while you may say, yes, I am the one in the fasted state. I am the one who had a kale smoothie or whatever you feel good about. And then watch what the mind does. It will continue to poke at you too. It will continue to poke at you. Maybe it will look for any cracks, want to sort of shore up any cracks so that you may stay in your ivory tower, your elevated stance, lest you slip and fall and find your way back to the commoners who are still eating the food that they like. Your journey is your own, period. It's your own. It's not for others, and theirs is not for you. And it is a slippery slope when we want to be helpful. Maybe we consider ourselves to be healers, and maybe we do this for a living, or maybe you just, as you've begun to heal your own life, you feel you have wisdom to share, which is valuable. But if you really pay attention to friends and family members and things like that, people really love to give unsolicited advice. It's almost in our nature in some ways that it's like wired in us that the way to help is to give advice, even when it's not asked for. A simple way to challenge this frame of thinking is to only provide wisdom when someone asks you for it. You may find this trickier than it appears, and you may recognize how much you are giving advice freely that no one has asked for. Because in a way, it is a form of judgment, and there are scales of judgment. You know, you can judge something positively. You can praise things, right? You can praise your children. You can praise friends and family. But praise is a slippery slope too. It's one side of a coin where the other is disparagement, criticism. And feedback is valuable. And depending on the context and the situation, maybe that's part of your role, is to provide feedback. But ultimately, on the spiritual path, on the healing path, that is your journey and yours alone, there is no need to have opinions, actually. Opinions don't really matter. Opinions of what's going on in the world, opinions of what others are doing. If emotions arise in you, you can be with it. But getting into long conversations about how you see things, your perspective, your opinion, your form of judgment, if you notice, those conversations don't ultimately prove fruitful most of the time, and they don't really support your own journey, because unless you're reflecting on yourself, you are not really healing yourself. People love to talk about politics. People love to judge systems. I've done it plenty in my life, and I continue to at times, to get wrapped up in the state of things, to get caught up in the news, to get caught up in social media. And what do? We judge. We form opinions on everything. So much so that you leave yourself open to be disappointed and triggered by just about anything. You create such a tiny realm where you can feel comfortable and secure and okay, because you have so many opinions that at any one time can be challenged or confronted or disappointed. And so if you just begin to let some of them go, and you may say, well, I'm just a very opinionated person. That's wonderful, but you don't have to be. It's not innate. You can let go some of your opinions. Opinions are not knowing. Opinions are just conditioned belief systems that produce thinking. If you practice coming back to yourself and practice allowing things to be as they are, and some things are horrific. Trust me, I know. But the opinions in themselves don't really do much of healing. So unless you plan to take action in a given moment, practice letting some opinions go. Practice being opinionless. We've almost come to a state in society where we feel having opinions makes us a good person. Having a sort of quote unquote moral stance on everything that goes on every person, makes you a deep thinker, an analytical thinker, and a good person. Why? So you can show other people how smart you are and how the perfectly right way to live life should be. It doesn't really have to be any of your concern what other people do. I heard this reflected again recently, which is what Gandhi said, which is, my life is my message, right? Just be the way. Just be the light. Be the light. Man, that Gandhi said some poignant shit. Just be the light. And in the last episode of this podcast, I was talking about the question that resolves all questions. And so I can come back to it now and say that when I find myself in judgment, I find myself stewing about why a parent or a friend or a stranger or a person I'll never meet is not behaving in the way that I think they should, or changing their life in the way that I think they should. I can come back to just be the light. Just be the light. It does not fucking matter what they are doing. And actually, there's an opportunity for you to forgive, for you to cultivate compassion, because as you do so, as it states in A Course in Miracles, As you give the miracle of forgiveness, you heal them and yourself. You provide for them and yourself, and you are in the position of privilege in that case. You have the privilege of not being stuck wherever they are stuck. So with that privilege, cultivate forgiveness. The ego so often wants to rub it in and say, I'm here and you're there, and if only you would do this. If only you worked a little harder. The Seinfeld reference. But with your privilege, it's a great opportunity to be miraculous, to provide the miracle of forgiveness. And you will notice what opens up in you, which is deep love. Deep love. When you find that you are able to forgive the things you've been judging, it is breathtakingly blissful. You realize how much you're carrying with your judgment, how heavy it is, how burdensome it is, how occupying, and how exhausting. And I don't mean to minimize how challenging it is, because I speak to this topic because I wrestle with it daily. I wrestle with it daily. And as my journey has changed or evolved, my relationship to it has evolved as well. At first, it may seem to get worse. The judgment may seem to get worse when you start to heal, because firstly, you may notice how others start to judge you, and you may notice your own insecurities about changing. When we play a certain role for so long, it really disrupts the dynamic when you start to change. And it takes courage, because others will judge you. I mean, even if it's not the nth degree harsh, they will be surprised. They'll have questions. And earlier on my path, when I started to take some leaps, I would get quite defensive, and I wouldn't know how to answer people, because I didn't know. We don't have all the answers for how we're changing. We cannot yet see outside the tunnel when we're simply guided to take leaps, nor do we have to explain ourselves, but it can feel pressured. And when we're feeling judged, we may snap back. We may get angry. We may criticize. We may push away. We may feel misunderstood. And with practice, when we are able to sit with the childhood wounds that live within, the wounds of feeling misunderstood and unworthy and not good enough, we may ultimately come back to a place of forgiveness for those who cannot see where we're headed. I'm referencing some real noble people in this podcast, but yeah, whatever Jesus said, forgive them for what they do not know, something like that. And it's not for them, it's for us, but it's both. Our forgiveness works miracles. I think that's about all I have to say on judgment. It's a tricky game. Be watchful as you can, and just name it. You will be naming it a lot. And that's okay. Forgive yourself first for being a person who is surprisingly in judgment most of the time, because honestly, that's how we're conditioned to be. Yeah, I was trained as a clinical psychologist. You're trained to be a professional judger. I mean, and then there are literal people who are judges, but that's a whole nother story. People who are at the supreme level, so to speak, proving quite biased, right? Another topic for another day. But yeah, in lots of in different fields where the purported goal is to heal and to serve and to help, a lot of it is judgment. um, and I started to recognize I did not want to be that way. We call it conceptualization, and then we use diagnosis to compartmentalize people and put them into boxes and give them labels for their own good. Sort of. It's easier to make sense of people when we have labels to give them and boxes to put them in. But then you notice people who diagnose a lot may have a subtle or not so subtle anxiety about what boxes they fit into. Because that's how it works. That's how judgment works. So as you start to change your life, if you are at a place of readiness to do so, watch how you begin to see other people on their paths. And if you begin to say things like, well, if only you'd come with me to the gym, if only you'd start waking up at 5 or 4 in the morning, your life might be better too, Can you be okay with where other people are at? Because it's really not your journey. It's none of your concern. And you don't know what they're being guided to heal. You don't know what their timeline looks like. And it's not for you to say. If you want to be of use, keep healing. And if you feel you have something to say, then say it. But watch the tone and the request. Make things into an invitation for others. And again, I invite you, it's not a demand, but if you are at a place of readiness to hear this, then I invite you to practice only giving advice when it's requested. See what happens. Alrighty, well, this was episode 2 of Be the Vessel. May it be a gift, a medicine, an invitation, and a light frequency for all who are ready to receive it. Take care.